OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
All right, you're very welcome along. It is New Year's Eve. Who thought that we were going to make it all the way to New Year's Eve to say goodbye to this godforsaken year? Owen, how the hell are you? Eoin Sheahan, how the hell are you? Well, that would be the most 2020 thing that has happened to us all year. Nathan Murphy, how the hell are you?
I've never been better, Ger. Jesus Christ. This has been, some would say, the pinnacle of Off the Balls 2020.
Happy New Year to one and all. Can you hear us now, Owen?
I can hear you now. I don't know what's happened right there.
Ah, right.
I can see you, and I thought by looking closer at the screen, my volume would also go up, but actually no, that is not how it works.
Jedi mind trick. Well,
Yeah,
just to bring everybody, to open the kimono a little bit and bring everybody along, what we're doing today is we're looking back at highlights, in inverted commas. We're putting 2020 in a time capsule so that when they open it in a decade, when they look back and they go, what was it really like to be on the front line of sports coverage? Shouldn't have said that. To talk incessantly about stuff that was happening that doesn't really matter. What was that like? And that's what the point of this morning's programme is. Nathan is here to talk about football, and we'll talk about the Ireland stuff in a minute. But I want to start by playing a happier time when there were fans in stadiums and we had live games from the ground every Sunday. Have a listen.
United getting back. Mo Salah to settle for Liverpool. Salah scores in front of the Kop, and Liverpool are going 16 points clear at the top of the Premier League table. And Alisson runs the length of the pitch to celebrate. It's 2-0 at Anfield, and it's never heard noise like it. Mo Salah wins the game for Liverpool.
What was it actually like to be there?
Magic. As I say, the noise from the Kop. Because Liverpool knew at that stage that they were probably going to win the Premier League title. They're the commanding lead. This is last January. It's almost a year ago at this stage. But Manchester United are on the attack in the last minute. They have a corner. There's that fatalism that is there around Liverpool supporters, or that was there of, well, something will surely go horribly wrong at some stage, that United will probably pop up and equalise and they won't get that minute of glory, having already drawn at Old Trafford, having won every single other game so far that season, except against Manchester United. Winning the league, as much as it would mean, you need to beat United as well. And to go from one end of the pitch to the other in the final minute, knowing that not just are they beating Manchester United, that's it. That is the title essentially there and then. Remember, Liverpool went 25 points clear at one stage last season. And we were there for a lot of the big days, even at the start of 2019, Manchester City, Spurs, and the atmosphere around the stadium pre-match and the atmosphere when, say, You'll Never Walk Alone started, well, every time you would hear it, would send shivers up your spine. The noise level just rose and rose. And at that stage in January, you're thinking, what is this going to be like in the middle of May on that final home game of the season when Jordan Henderson lifts the Premier League trophy? What is the city of Liverpool going to be like that weekend when people are staying over for the weekend so they're still there for the parade through the city? And obviously, the world changed, and that didn't happen. They won the title. But I think it's such a terrible shame for so many people who, from this country, who travel over every single weekend. And when we're going over to games, you would meet them time and time again, spending an absolute fortune, particularly in recent years where it's so hard to get tickets, where it's so hard to get flights, to go over every single Saturday or Sunday. And then having waited so long to actually be denied that moment to be there when it finally did happen.
Yeah, I can see how they will lament that. But at the same time, football came back. There was a period there where it was like, oh, no, season's done. All the Man United fans were like, no, that's it. No, just going to have to, no winner. Don't think it would be fair to have a winner. And then they got football back and they did win it. So, my sympathy for Liverpool fans is diminished somewhat by the fact that they are supporters of currently the most exciting team in world football to watch.
Yeah, and maybe that's the most surprising thing that happened, was just how good Liverpool were. If you look at their success in the 30 years since they won the title, generally it's been drama from Champions League in 2005, Steven Gerrard's equaliser in the FA Cup final, even the League Cup they won was a penalty shootout. the Champions League semi-final against Barcelona. I think most Liverpool supporters felt that when it came, they would either somehow creep over the line or to be this mad, dramatic moment where they somehow steal it on the last day, a reverse Michael Thomas. I don't think anybody really expected until the last couple of years that they would go and win it so convincingly. Remember, they went into last season chasing a historically good side in Manchester City. And just through their sheer relentless brilliance, particularly in those first 5-6 months of the season, they wore Manchester City down, like 27 games unbeaten with just one draw in that before that defeat to Watford just before the lockdown, and putting together a team that every time you watch them, you couldn't but be impressed with their attitude and the quality of players they have as well. I know they're going through like most teams, a bit of inconsistency so far this season. But there was definitely, around that time, that Manchester United game, you're looking at the Liverpool side thinking, they arguably have the best goalkeeper in the world, right back, left back, centre back, and a front three that is a match for any side in Europe. And all of that obviously comes down to the genius of their manager. So, yeah, like what a team, what a 2020. And it doesn't feel as though they're going away anytime soon.
No, that's the other thing. It's like, as long as Klopp is here, it feels like it's sustainable. You would hope that whoever gets the gig next somehow can match him. Stephen Gerrard seems to be doing an okay job at Rangers, but it's a massive step up. So there's always that, particularly now with managers, that you don't have this forever. It's not going to last forever. That someone's going to come along and knock you off your effing perch.
Yeah, and talking about the crowds, there's also what he has brought to Anfield over the 5 and a bit years he's been there. When I started covering games for Off the Ball, you'd be at Anfield on a regular basis, and well, the Chelsea game is probably the most famous one, but there was even that first year under Klopp, so often you would go, the nervousness, how quickly the supporters would get on the players' back, time and time again, going in front and giving up leads, drawing games against lesser opposition. Even that last game, the last time they were beaten at Anfield, and we're going on, nearly 4 years now since they were beaten at Anfield? Going on 4 years since we're beaten at Anfield against Crystal Palace, and Christian Benteke scores, and you just feel there's no momentum, there's no consistency. And to go on the run they have over 60 games at Anfield, it is that fortress that I suppose people grew up hearing about, but for a long time just wasn't that. And being able to sustain it when the supporters aren't there, God knows what it'll be like when they get a full stadium sometime, you hope, in 2021.
Yeah, and hopefully sooner rather than later once the vaccine kicks in. And so we're getting everybody to pick moments. Nathan's moment is that goal. It's obviously a moment that revolves around his own piece of brilliant commentary, which, I hope everybody spotted very quickly there, that there's a whole year of moments to pick from, and he happens to pick the one that is his commentary. But sure, look, he likes to share the glory around. As an Arsenal fan, do you feel, that you're emboldened and in raptures of joy that you're witness to this brilliant Liverpool team?
Absolutely. A fantastic team, of course. Stumbled against Watford, stumbled against Manchester City, stumbled against Arsenal. A full 3 games beaten in last season, apparently one of the greatest Premier League seasons we're ever likely to see. So, of course, that definitely warms the cockles when Ismail Assar is running around. Who was in goal that night? Alisson in goal that night. Just a phenomenal moment of the season. And showing the mortality of these great Liverpool men. Of course, certain Premier League winners of yesteryear have shown that they weren't mortal whatsoever, and purely unadulterated undefeatedness, brilliance. That's what we had in 2004. But Liverpool, they were phenomenal. I wonder, Nathan, is there a sense of fear that there won't be a similar reason to go as crazy maybe next year or the year after, whenever full stadiums do return, that the manner in which they won this year's Premier League is the only way that true joy could have been experienced, and it is a moment that is forever missed, that doing back-to-back titles or going on this run now that we expect from Liverpool over the next little while perhaps won't be met with the same level of, oh my God, I can't believe that's happened.
I think come May, if Liverpool were to manage to go back-to-back and it's a full Anfield, you will see something similar. You're right, though. We all imagine what it will be like when we're allowed back into stadiums and when we're allowed experience sort of the unexpected joy that sport can bring. And will there be a certain fakeness to that? Will we be sort of forcing ourselves to get more excited than we naturally would? You look at what's going on in Australia and New Zealand at the moment, where sport is back and they're being played in front of potentially full stadiums, where actually I'm watching a lot of rugby games and the stadiums aren't full. And I'm thinking, I thought we were all going to go and savor all these moments. And the second we're allowed back in, every match will be packed to the rafters. But actually, it seems, when the option is there, life goes back to normal quite quickly. And sometimes you go to a game, sometimes you don't. And maybe it will be just, Liverpool are like Manchester United were back in the 90s if they can go back to back. And it's just another game. Yeah, we celebrate. But that opportunity that you say to go absolutely full wild.
They had it. They had it at that game, and that's why this moment actually really works. That game, we knew that they had wrapped up the league at that point. Everything that came afterwards was the matter of degrees, but it was impossible for them to blow that. And I know the Liverpool fans have notoriously, and rightly so, been very scared about counting their chickens in recent seasons, in essentially 25 years. But at the same time, we all knew that Liverpool had won the title. We knew that Liverpool had won the title last November. So this time last year, we actually knew that they already had the title wrapped up because Man City had crapped out so spectacularly. But I think they would have had it that night when you beat Manchester United 2-0, when you do it with that goal at the end of the game, where there is a surge of energy and noise in the crowd. That's the moment that you go, this is what it feels like to be league champions and title winners.
And there's different ways of doing it as well. So you mentioned that Arsenal side, and obviously, they never went back to back. So they never had that experience of doing it 2 years in a row. Whereas you look at Manchester United, Liverpool will never win a league like they won this one, where they've won it with 7 games to go and there's the break and they come back and you're sort of just waiting for the inevitable. But you look at the way United won the league sometimes, when you end up with a battle, as more likely than not is going to happen this season, it'll go down to the final couple of games, that you will have that drama and you'll have that burst, that single burst of energy where it probably will come down to sort of one match in that final 3-4 game stretch. So I think in all likelihood there will be a moment to match that for somebody this season.
Yeah,
I hope so. I think that there have been so many incredible heights in football over the last 10 years or so, whether it was Pep's Barcelona or Pep's Manchester City, or even the post-Pep years of Barcelona as well, where you start to question if a certain team will last forever. And I think we actually got to that stage with Manchester City a couple of years ago, before Liverpool really came to the boil, where we thought to ourselves, God, Manchester City could win 3 or 4 league titles here in a row. They're spending more money. They've got the best manager in the world, it seems. And there's only one way they're going. That it does seem that there is a caution again this year almost with Liverpool fans, where they realise the value of going back to back. They realise how tough a thing it is to do, that maybe when they do get back, hopefully by the end of this season, that there will be the sense of, hold on a minute, this is bloody special as well, actually doing 2 in a row.
All right. We are deciding what's going what's going in the OTB Time Capsule to sum up the year that was. Nathan has picked one of his own commentary pieces for Mo Salah scoring against Manchester United and wrapping up the league for Liverpool. Our second moment number 2, is Eoin Sheahan. The stage is yours. What have you picked?
Well, it's going to be Stephen Kenny becoming Republic of Ireland manager. We knew it was going to be something that would have happened this year. We didn't know when it was going to happen. We knew that the Slovakia game was getting pushed back and back and back to an uncertain date. And the FAI obviously came in before the summertime and pulled the plug on Mick McCarthy and inserted Stephen Kenny into the job. A story, of course, broke here on Off the Ball that Saturday. Of course, everything that's happened since then has been a mini story in itself. Take your pick. Is it the COVID tests before that Slovakia game, the subsequent COVID shit shows that have happened in other games post that, the battle of the soul of Irish football, as you put it yourself, Ger? If it's going to be something like that, I think it's going to be remembered for quite some time, but perhaps not for great reasons. I would like to think, though, that in a time capsule sense, we'll open this up in years to come and say, that short-term pain was definitely worth it, what was about to happen, because I don't think there is any middle ground here, that if Stephen Kenny isn't Ireland manager at the end of the 2022 World Cup qualification cycle, I don't think we'll be going towards a manager of his ilk yet again. I think that what you said about the soul of Irish football being up for debate and being up for battle, I think that's certainly true. It ends on a bad note this year. The leak from the camp was the last thing we saw from Ireland before the year wrapped up on the international front. And that's how we go into 2021. So a bad year for Irish football, no question. But the story has been Stephen Kenny being brought in and what he's shown as a manager so far, because unlike the rugby team, which we'll get to later on, there is a clear identity and at least we know where we want to go.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And he talked about that identity actually with John Duggan shortly after becoming Ireland boss, explaining how he wants his side to play. Have a look.
I think from my point of view, I will look to, I only get one crack at this, and I will look to change the way we play. It is important to me. It is very, very important to me. And I think to a lot of people, they want to really see a vibrant Irish team passing the ball well, cohesively, and trying to win games, and with an element of creativity, And I think, talk is cheap, and anyone can say anything. And I think that is one thing. But we've shown in the under-21 team, for example, this year, a real creative spark in all our games. But obviously it's a different level. The senior international team is a completely different level. So that is the challenge, to make it a creative attacking team that people can connect with. I think there has been, at various times over the last 10 years, there has been a little disconnect, but I think there has been periods of success in that. Although we haven't qualified for three of the last 4 tournaments. Can he radically change everything in 3 or 4 training sessions? Probably not. Would I try and do that? Probably not. I think, but if there is 5 or 6 games to prepare, it gives you a chance to really get your stamp.
Yeah. So, Nathan, you've been at the press conferences, virtually all of them, and the ones that you could go to over the last while, and you've been at the games. He's on a sticky wicket.
Yeah, there's no question he is. I don't think anyone could have imagined Eoin went through the sort of sideshow of shit-showness that has happened, but on the pitch that we'd be 8 games in, that he wouldn't have had a victory and there'd be just the one goal. But you cannot ignore everything that has happened. And we're talking and listening to the noise of Anfield back in January. The last game I covered was Ireland-Bulgaria at an empty Aviva Stadium. And this is just not natural football. This is not what playing and representing your country is about. With an Ireland team that day that was missing half a dozen players through injury, through COVID issues, he has had no momentum whatsoever. Literally everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. From that moment that night in Slovakia when Aaron Connolly was ruled out of the game and Adamida. So it's incredibly hard and harsh to judge Stephen Kenny, but that is international management, unfortunately. That is, when you're our Ireland manager, yes, there's a sideshow, but people are just going to look at results. And there's been a divide right from the start of those who feel that Stephen Kenny, with the League of Ireland pedigree, shouldn't be the international manager. Those people will feel that what they've seen has just proven their point. I think, as Eoin says, there's probably been signs, certainly in that Slovakia game, which, even with Connolly and Ida missing, was as close as Stephen Kenny has come to having his full first choice 11 out there. That was a really good Irish performance. One of the best Irish performances we've seen, certainly since Euro 2016 in the match against Italy, where they knew what they were about. They created countless opportunities, and they can't take their chances. They just cannot take their chances. And we can talk about the lack of Robbie Keane, the talk of a natural goal scorer. Like, Conor Howard has to take that opportunity, no matter what the size of the match, no matter what the quality of player. When you are standing 8 yards out, the ball at your feet, and you have to hit it either side of a defender standing on the line, you have to take that chance. Alan Brown has to take his chances. So, again, that's not something that's totally out of Stephen Kenny's control, I'd say, because he picks the teams, he puts those players in those positions. But that is the game that I think you have to make most judgment on. And that was a good, strong, improving, progressive Irish performance. But he's on the back foot. There's no question about that. And these 3 World Cup qualifiers coming up in March, all in the space of a week, he needs to somehow find results, find a bit of rhythm, find a bit of momentum, because the vultures are circling. The vultures have been circling, some of them, since day one.
The real shame about it all is obviously what's going to be missed out on, obviously, next year, assuming that it's going to be a relatively vibrant European Championships. It's hard to kind of think back on every single tournament Ireland have qualified for and not associate it with a massive cultural moment for Ireland as a country, let alone as a sporting nation. Of course, that goes all the way back to the 90s. Maybe Euro 2012 is the one that
Eoin wasn't in Poland, wouldn't you?
Well, I was going to say we were all very distant.
Does John Delaney in Sopot count as a major cultural moment?
I think so. I think if you were
the
there,
fields.
I was going to say, with the exception of Euro 2012, unless you were there, every other tournament that Ireland have qualified for has led to some sort of moment of national happiness, whether it's Robbie Keane in 2002 or Robbie Brady in 2016. And obviously, before this century, it's fairly obvious that would something like that have happened again next year? Probably, and we'll never know. That's 2020. That's like all the conversations about Stephen Kenny we can have. The thing is,
but I think that's what we're trying to move past.
That's not going to happen.
In a way, you're dead right. Like the moments are what sum up Irish football, but that's what they are. It's Shane Long's goal. It's Robbie Brady's header. You can't plan for them. You can't predict them. But because they come out of nowhere, the performances come out of nowhere. I think the Stephen Kenny plan is that actually when you go along and you watch Ireland, you'll get a certain standard of performance, a certain standard of entertainment, that it's an enjoyable game of football to watch. And the moments are just a bonus. Whereas I think for the last 15, 16 years, all we've had is the moments. We've had nothing else. We've just had a long run of friendlies and qualifiers that are instantly forgettable. Like, how many regular Ireland games away from the major tournaments stand out in recent times? Very, very few. Where I think actually his plan would be, and this may not happen, to get to a high enough level that when people are going to Lansdowne Road on a Wednesday night for a qualifier, you know it's going to be a good game. You know Ireland are going to play some good, strong, attacking football. And then hopefully you get the moments on top of that. But at least there's entertainment along the way, rather than these one-off moments which come out of nowhere every 4 years. You can't predict and sometimes just don't happen. But again, if results don't happen quickly in March, this is football. The pressure is going to be incredibly, incredibly intense on them.
Well, so look, the World Cup qualifiers, again, it's an unbelievably difficult thing to come out of. We know that traditionally we haven't done as well in these as we have done in Euros, even just in terms of making playoffs, etc. Like, what's an acceptable level? What level of progress does he need to get to for the Vultures to stop circling? Win games and score goals? Does he have to qualify? Does he I
don't think he has to qualify. I think this is it's very straightforward for me. An Irish manager has to qualify for the European Championship, and qualifying for a World Cup is a bonus. Remember, Ireland, third seeds, you have to win your group to qualify automatically. Second seeds are going into a convoluted playoff system with 4 other sides that maybe by the time they come around, Ireland are in a decent and strong position. But it's incredibly difficult. 13 teams from Europe qualify for a World Cup. So qualifying for World Cups is a bonus. But I think he needs to be right in contention going into those last couple of games around the qualifiers. You need to beat the minnows. You need to beat them convincingly. And you need to be strong side who aren't just backs against the wall against the top 2 seeds, hoping for the best and praying that somehow Shane Long will pop up a goal from nowhere from a long ball from Darren Randolph. That actually, this is an Ireland side who sort of know what they're about. But it's much easier said than done. And I think there needs to be hope towards the end of this campaign that Ireland can qualify. They put themselves in a position where they can qualify. But to say that they have to qualify for him to keep his job is it's
too high. I would say
unfair.
Yeah, it's too high a bar. Owen, what for you? Are we winning the fight for the soul of Irish football, or are we in retreat at the moment, digging our trenches?
In retreat, definitely in retreat. Unfortunately, just because of the way the year has gone in terms of the results, I don't think that in any reasonable mind you should be saying that the battle is over or anything like that. But I think anybody who had quiet reservations about Stephen Kenny beforehand have got a hell of a lot louder after the events of the last few months, and that to me suggests that the people who are on the Stephen Kenny side are in retreat a little bit, but that shouldn't be the case whatsoever. And actually, do you know what, Nathan? I think you're right in terms of not making this a qualify or you're out job for Stephen Kenny. There are ways to mark progress that doesn't involve not necessarily just qualifying for a tournament all the time or not qualifying for a tournament all the time. There is a way to not qualify for a World Cup and also look impressive. There is hopefully going to now be a crop of youngsters that will be the backbone of this team for the next couple of years. We have no real option now when you look at the retirement of someone like David McGoldrick, particularly in the attacking areas. We've just got to hope that someone, even with half the goal scoring capabilities of Robbie Keane, will be able to hold on to that jersey and bring this Irish team to the next level, because it does seem that is the corner piece of the jigsaw. Everything else has clicked at one stage or another. It's just been putting the ball in the back of the net. And those results against the minnows would be very interesting. The 4th, 5th seeds, can Ireland actually put them away? Yeah.
Troy Parrott is going to be the new Robbie Keane. You heard it here first. It's an original thought. Copyrighted, patented this New Year's Eve. Something to give us all hope. Looking forward to the future. Nathan, good stuff. Thanks very much. We'll let you go.
Thanks, lads.
and deal with the sugared and post-Christmas kids that you have there.
Yeah.
Enjoy that.
Mr. Potato from Peppa Pig is frightening, apparently.
All right. Not really.
This is a worrying development because he appears in every episode.
Yeah,
so what the hell am I meant to do?
No, just find something else. OTB AM is brought to you every morning with thanks to Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is New Year's Eve and we're filling the OTB 2020 Time Capsule here on OTBAM. Up next we're talking rugby and the Irish women's national team and Vera Pauw's charges and their bid for European qualification. To set the scene first, it's rugby. Here's Brian O'Driscoll speaking after Ireland's second loss to England and summing up what's been a largely frustrating year.
What were they actually trying to do that we didn't see?
I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly honest with you, Joe. It looks different each week. So what is ultimately the answer? That I don't know.
Right. I would interpret that as a little bit damning if you can't see what we're trying to do.
I couldn't properly understand it at the weekend. I also think the quality of passing was a little bit disappointing. You know, guys were stuck inside shoulder. The ball was being shipped on. Bundy and Chris Farrell were doing the very best they could with, you know, bodies with defensive line in their face. I thought Keith Earls, you know, did as best as could be expected with minimal opportunity. But it was quite difficult to see. You know, we didn't see any kind of modifications to some of the tweaks that we saw against Wales the previous week. So I'm not entirely sure, considering the amount of possession that we did have, or what we were trying to do, or where we felt the space was. Yeah.
So this is the next part of our OTB Time Capsule. We're trying to sum up the year that was. That was Brian O'Driscoll, obviously speaking with Joe Malloy at the end of November after another crushing loss for Ireland against England. This is obviously New Year's Eve. We're filling in the 2020 OTB Time Capsule. Adrian Barry has replaced Nathan Murphy. That's happened before, I suspect. Adrian, how are you?
Not too bad. I'm trying to rack my brains as to what that... no, I'm not sure. Generally the other way around, I think, is our rule of thumb. The
2020 Time Capsule is the message and the signals that we would like recorded for posterity. I don't know if you watch Dark on Netflix, but, like, you know, there's lots of multiple realities happening all at the same time. Perhaps ours is the only one that actually matters, but I don't know, maybe what if this is all a dream, Adrian, and actually Ireland are better at rugby than England?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. If only to give us some comfort during these dark winter months. I wish you were right. I think they are better than us anyway, right? Like, I think, but hasn't that always really been the case, given the playing pot, size of the population, the enormity of the game there? It felt like that's always been the case. It's at the minute it feels like with Ireland that the players are better than the coaching. Now, it's early days in the coaching, so how much you want to write off the coaching ticket, I suppose, needs to be based on that. Probably there definitely needs to be a bit more patience. There aren't too many people like aggressively calling for Andy Farrell's head or for the coaching ticket's heads. But it is always that balance, right? Like, that's the ultimate success or failure of a coaching ticket in any sport. Are they getting the best out of the elements that they have? And you would have to say clearly at the minute with that Irish rugby team, no.
Okay, I'm not actually sure I agree with you. So that's just everybody's picking moments. I got lumped with rugby this year, and my moments are Ireland against England at Twickenham, and you can take your pick between Stockdale's error or Sexton's error. And I was thinking about this. I have a very strong memory at the end, as it was all coming to an end for Roy Keane at Manchester United, the highlights show on a Saturday night. Every week, without fail, there'd be a Roy Keane package picked, and Dunphy would do the voiceover on it. And they went from, like, being the best midfielder in world football to the very end of his career, where his hip was killing him, and he was getting shunted out the door to Celtic because they didn't need him anymore. And I remember one of the packages ultimately being Keane knocking the ball out for a throw-in, and Dunphy going, "Now, I know it doesn't look like anything, but that's the feverishness, that's the tigerishness. He's doing that because nobody else will do it." It's like he knocked the ball out for a throw-in. It might have been against Sunderland. This was the highlight today. And you're like, we might just be at that point in the Irish rugby cycle where we're going to big big teams, and we are not good enough because our players are not good enough anymore, Adrian. And no matter about, you could have the greatest coaching ticket of all time. If you put us up against our England counterpits, it's going to be very interesting to see how many Irish players make the Lions match day squad. We might have one or two players in the team, maybe if they get back to form. But who for the Lions would you pick now? James Ryan, maybe. But I think there's loads of good cases for people ahead of him.
I think you're right, and I think that the case for Ryan was a lot stronger before the last time we played England, where the Irish line-out gets dominated, and you look at a player like Maro Itoje, and people are just saying, the captaincy is his to refuse and all that. So, I think you're right. And then I suppose after that, there is an element of how well or otherwise the players can perform that's hugely tied in with how they've been coached, right? I think it's not to say that they can just offload, in the parlance, all the responsibility for their performances or their form to the coach. But at the same time, it does look like something's wrong there. I think when you break down some of the parts in terms of this Irish team at the minute or where they might be headed, Ger, over the next while, there are a lot of reasons there to be excited about Irish rugby in terms of some of the personnel. And particularly in the pack, I think there are some really exciting players coming through there. We were all hoping to see Ryan Baird towards the back end of this year, and then injury denied us that. But even across the back row, some of those Leinster options, particularly, really strong players coming through there. There's a bit of shuffling going on in the front row, and we don't quite know where that's at. Are our pack the most dominant pack in the Six Nations? We're definitely not, and we're getting dominated by England. And are there individual players better than ours at the minute? I would say largely yes. And is their game plan better than us at the minute? I would say largely yes. So it's a difficult one. In a team going backwards, it's very hard to make a case for players getting included in a line squad, as you say. I can't think of many that would make that team.
The general reason for my despair is that the performance that we saw, and it seems like a world away now, and I'm sure people sit and listen to this on New Year's Eve have to chisel off a lot of stuff that's happened between now and then. But that Twickenham game, we were so utterly dominated that actually the scoreboard was too close, as it was in November internationals. Right. The scoreboard was far too close. England toyed with us and just didn't bother their arses beating us the way they should have and could have. They actually could have killed us. And we were like, it was only a couple of really egregious individual errors. Those individual errors came because the players were spooked by the power of what England were doing. And if that wasn't the case, then you wouldn't be able to point to a history of them doing it to us at Lansdowne Road from the first second, where the overthrown line-out is an explosion and the game is gone straight away. Now, in fairness, we had that ridiculous experiment of playing Henshaw full back that day. But it's from that moment up to this, I've seen nothing that Irish rugby teams have done against English rugby teams that suggests we know a way around this. And the most galling part about all of this, I think, is that Leinster, you hoped, had the coaching tickets and the playing staff to be able to work their way through what was going to happen against Saracens, a depleted Saracens, but they didn't, and they paid for that.
I think the most galling aspect of it all is that there didn't seem to be an attempt to try and do something different against England this year, because let's not brush over the fact that there was multiple occasions in 2019 in which England absolutely slaughtered Ireland. That was in the World Cup warm-up as well. A trend had emerged before Andy Farrell became head coach, where England had bullied Ireland and destroyed them on a number of occasions. This year, you would have liked to have seen them come up with something different. There's a case to be made that Wales have actually had a better year than Ireland have had, because at least they've tried something new. We know that it's wrong. We know that it's wrong, and that it's not going to lead to them having success. But we're sitting in this purgatory at the end of 2020, wondering whether or not we're going about things the right way. If we get back to our 2018 level, can we beat a team like England, is question number one. I don't think the answer to that question is anywhere near a definite yes. So the other way you go about it is, can we come up with something new? In 2020, we haven't come up with anything new. You listen to Brian O'Driscoll and Keith Wood there. They don't even know what they're seeing. So this leads to a very bad and gloomy reflection on the year that was. What I will say, though, is that you're talking about not a lot of Irish players getting into the Lions next year. Who the hell cares? We had all the Irish players in it last time. We had great success in it. We felt like our Irish players were front and centre when it came to that Lions squad. And, of course, that spilled over into phenomenal 18 months for Irish rugby thereafter. I think the scars of 2019 are so deep that people will forgive Andy Farrell as long as he gets it right for 2023. And I'm kind of laughing as I say that because it's a long way away. But these World Cup cycles have become almost a parody of itself. That if he really is working on something which we haven't been able to identify so far, and it comes good over the next couple of years, then all will be well. All is not lost, but it does feel like a wasted year.
I feel like with Andy Farrell, the IRFU must have realised that it was going to take him a little bit of time to adjust to the difficulties and the differentness of being in charge. Every sport, every head coach in every part of the world who stepped up from being a number 2 to a number 1, I think there's probably a few outliers who have managed straight away to seamlessly go, yeah, absolutely, I know exactly what I'm doing here because I've been planning for this. It's like it's the unintended stuff that you have to deal with. It's the HR issues. It's the other bits of the business that were shielded from you, particularly by somebody who was as micromanagement styled as Joe Schmidt, that he's suddenly got to deal with. So that's going to take him a period of time. And I would actually give him the time to do that, because you've decided, the IRFU have decided, that they saw something in him that they felt that was worth keeping on board. And you would have to assume that they're going to give him that time. And so it looks like, almost irrespective of what happens, like he's going to be our coach heading into the next World Cup. In which case, I know we've talked with Alan Quinn on the show before about how important the Six Nations is. Like, if he was to come out and say, actually, you know what, I need to blood a lot of players, and I need to get a lot of players quickly to see if they have what it takes to play at test level, because we don't have depth. Every time players get injured, everybody goes, oh, we can't win that game because there's 4 players injured. It's like, you're always going to have 4 players injured. It's international rugby. 4 of your best players will always be injured. That's just the rules of the game. You can't pick which 4. You don't know how long they're going to be out for, but the attritional rate of international rugby. So I feel like you have to double down on the Andy Farrell experiment. And actually, there's a year of what Wales are going through, probably this year, ahead of us. And it's this time next year where you're going, OK, what's your first team?
Yeah, I think even on that, Ger, like, I think that, and the Georgia game is so long ago now, don't ask me to name the starting 15, but that was a head scratcher for me on that basis of blooding new players and having a look at new talent and giving, you know, the thing that Stuart Lancaster always talks about, the spread of caps, like giving more caps to players who don't have them, to get them up to speed and to get the group further along that track of cumulative caps. So, like, why are we starting Conor Murray in that Georgia game, for example? Or I know James Ryan maybe needs to try captaincy, but maybe he shouldn't be in there. Like, why aren't we looking at Craig Casey or looking at, like, I mean, Ross Byrne, fair enough. You could also make a case for some, maybe even for his brother or some of the other outcasts to have a look at them. It felt like a bit of a, I mean, as it turned out, it was such a dire, desperate game anyway on every front. Hindsight looks great, but I would have been saying that before the game, that why not just use that game? It's a shot to, we're going to beat them whatever happens. Put out your B team and have a look at a bunch of players. That was slightly concerning for me. And there was a load of little system errors that I ultimately, you're right, if we limp through the next Six Nations and the following autumn's tests or whatever way the calendar is going to look over the next couple of years, I think you're right. He is going to remain the head coach heading into the World Cup. And like we've often said, should we stop looking at the Six Nations as the most important thing, and then it might pay dividends in the World Cup. But at the minute, there seems to be so many small system errors, like Hugo Keenan, one that jumped out for me from the Autumn Cup Series Nations, whatever it's called. Hugo Keenan standing at first receiver, and I know, look, it's a one-off thing and you can say a player standing in the wrong position, but he's standing at first receiver with Ireland about 5 metres out from the Welsh line. And needless to say, he gets swallowed up by the Welsh pack and the ball gets turned over. It's such a basic...
Oh, but presumably that was on purpose, no?
Rugby. You just don't see it happen. What's that?
Presumably that's on purpose. Like, they want to get him... Is that not a good sign?
You don't see a player of his build stood in that position with the bears of the Welsh pack ready to eat him alive, you know?
I don't know. Like, do you know, obviously you're connected to the team various ways, do you know that wasn't a planned move?
I would be, I don't know in the slightest, but I would be astonished if it was a planned move.
Like, I'd say they're trying to get the ball in Hugo Keenan's hands as much as possible. Stuff like that.
Yeah. But out wide somewhere, Ger, like in there, it's got to be one of your props, or it's got to be one of your back row. Like, that's, you're heading into the teeth of war there. That's not as somebody of Hugo Keenan's build. It really stood out for me at the time. I haven't heard anything from within the camp, nor am I that well connected, but it just stood out like a sore thumb.
Your philosophy and Andy Farrell's philosophies are at odds, it turns out.
Listen,
I do.
Point you're making.
I do wonder as well if there is a little bit of the Irish sports fan projecting onto the Irish rugby team a little bit. Like we spoke about Stephen Kenny earlier on and the fortunes of the football team. It's a year of upheaval for Irish sport, for Ireland's main two international teams. And I wonder if the overhaul that we've seen on the football front, part of our consciousness is saying that we must see this on the rugby front soon, ignoring the fact that we're coming from a spell, a very, very bad spell in football that's gone on for a hell of a lot longer than the spell has gone on for rugby. That I wouldn't be surprised if there's a part of Andy Farrell thinking to himself that success for him would be to turn the clock back a little bit, to get back to where this team and a lot of these players were at their peak. And maybe the idea of an overhaul just isn't appetizing to him whatsoever. He feels that the best outcome has already been seen by this team, and it's just about rediscovering that.
Except that would involve having World Player of the Year Johnny Sexton, as opposed to Johnny Sexton 2 years down the line. With the way that aging works, that's unlikely to happen. You know, that 2018 team, that's never going to happen again.
The biggest hope. Sorry.
Go on.
Well, the biggest hope for 2021, you're right, is that Joey Carberry comes back fully fit and doesn't get injured ever again, which is obviously not going to happen. But if he can put together a matter of months, puts together a full Six Nations campaign, puts together even like just a spell of weeks in a green Ireland jersey, whether it's in November, whether it's in the Six Nations, and just show us again why he can be that number 10. I think we'll be in a lot better place next year. You don't want to distill it down to one player, but the Sexton factor has been massive. It's unavoidable that he was going to go over the crest of his mountain after winning that World Player of the Year, because he won it at such a late age. And it's frustrating in Carberry that we've seen so many amazing moments, even in his short career at Munster. We've seen some outrageous stuff that he is constantly crocked. That if we can have one wish granted in 2021, it will be a clean bill of health for just him.
Yeah, and look, that would be absolutely amazing. I think we would all benefit from that. The one thing you would wonder is, though, that how will they find room for him in the team? Have we seen enough from Mike Catt and from Andy Farrell, who has essentially picked the four available centres whenever they're fit, and there's been no experimentation there. There's been no sense that actually we will try and get a second playmaker in at 12. We will try and play somebody who's a second out half, even for 10 or 15 minutes. Like, that might have been an interesting experiment to see at some point. Pick Sexton at 10, or pick Billy Burns at 10 and put Sexton in at 12, and see if we can get another couple of years out of Sexton. Like, they are clearly open to lateral thinking when you think about the fact that they moved a tight head to loose head, and he played an international rugby match there for the first time, which was like definitely outside the box thinking, lads. Might have been interesting to see him play like a season there for his club. If only you controlled the club and could tell them what to do. So I don't know. It feels a little bit like they're juggling a lot of plates, and some of the plates are collateral damage.
Would we be having a different conversation if Leinster had gone and won? I mean, if and buts and all that, but if Leinster had won the Heineken Cup, would we be saying that actually Irish rugby is in good health?
Yeah,
I think. And are we catastrophising slightly because look, they did, and they were knocked out, not hugely comprehensively, not in the same way of an Ireland-England game, but like they were beaten.
Sorry, hang on a second. The philosophy underpinning Saracens' victory against Leinster is the same philosophy that underpins the England team beating Ireland. That's why it's not catastrophising, it's seeing that link. And it's happened to Leinster 2 seasons in a row. So, as go Leinster, go Ireland, essentially at the moment. If Leinster had come up with a way to outthink Saracens, then Ireland would have copied that template. But the brightest minds in Irish rugby, which at the moment seem to be Leinster's, have been so far unable to use their talent to get around Saracens.
Just on that, you're right, but that is not what we should be. That's not the situation we should be dealing with. Again, if I can add a second thing onto my list of wishes for Irish rugby in 2021, is that the over-reliance on Leinster, not only from a playing standpoint, but from a coaching and thinking standpoint, ends, and that the great coaching ticket that they supposedly have lined up at Munster comes good. And I don't know, they finally win the Champions Cup semi-final. Even saying that seems outlandish at this point, given last season. That they might actually beat Leinster in a game, in a big game in 2021, maybe go all the way in Europe. These are the things we want to see from this Munster team, from this coaching ticket. And then all of a sudden, you have two different things to judge, I don't know, a match against Saracens by. If Munster come up against them, then you're like, so this is how Stephen Larkham thought about that game. That's how Stuart Lancaster thought about that game. what can we take from that? And we have players from both of these provinces. Of course, it goes for Connacht and Ulster as well.
Yeah.
But really, from a 2020 standpoint, Munster have been a disappointing part of it.
Okay, so our time capsule is Munster not even part of the conversation about the future of Irish rugby at the moment. We are injury-ridden and we have no plans. That's what we would like the signals going into the future. When somebody looks back on this short segment, they'd be like, wow, that was pretty grim, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You're looking in 2023 when we've won the World Cup.
Yeah, and look, our crystal ball section, that's a different show, folks. This is our time capsule. This is ending 2020 as you all thought it would end, in darkness and tears. Last point on rugby, anybody? No?
I just like the only thing I'd say is that look, it definitely does feel as if we're having a very sort of down conversation about Irish rugby, and that just feels where we're at the minute. It's possible, of course, anything is possible that all gets turned around in the 2021 Six Nations. It doesn't look likely at the minute.
No, and absolutely. There's no evidence. Where's your evidence for that? Where's your evidence for that? Well, that's just my opinion. Well, OTBAM is brought to you every morning with thanks to Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the morning ahead. Adrian, it's time for your moment, and you've picked the Irish women's national team.
Yeah, Vera Pauw's Republic of Ireland as a kind of a Trojan horse, I think, for a discussion and putting into the time capsule the 20 by 20 movement and generally women's sport in Ireland at the minute. But to focus on the Irish women's team to begin with, the moments that have stood out over the last couple of years, leading into the one moment that I want to put in the time capsule for this Republic of Ireland team. But the context of what had gone before, I think, is important for putting this in the time capsule for somebody to open, right? That's what we're talking about here in 10 years' time. And they're like, oh, why was this thing important? Well, there have been two moments in the lead into that. One of them was 2017, Nijmegen, Ireland hold the then European champions Holland to a 0-0 draw, and suddenly people were starting to pay attention to at that time Colin Bell's Republic of Ireland team, and Ireland had chances. There was a couple of big chances either end of the game. Also, we cleared off the line a couple of times, but chances to win that. And a young squad, 12,000 people turn up to see the game. It's garnering a huge amount of media attention, and suddenly people are starting to pay a lot of attention to this Republic of Ireland team. And that felt like an enormous moment almost in some ways when we talk about a hinge in the evolution of a team that could have been that moment. And then it was leading into, after that, 2 years ago, World Cup qualifier in Stavanger in Norway, where we had to go and get something out of the game. And again, it was another night where there was huge promise. It was actually a game that I was at, and I really felt it was a huge momentum behind that Irish team, positivity. It had gripped the nation again. And unfortunately, we just came up short. And they're the moments that stand out for me as the context to Ukraine in October and Ireland on the brink. And I mean, there was a lot of people were saying that people who know deeply about women's football backing Ireland at that point to make at least the Euro playoffs. And so we were playing Ukraine. We'd beaten them 3-2 before that. It was expected that we were going to get the job done. It was been spoken about on our channels and others as the biggest game in the history of international women's football for Ireland. That was the context of what was going on here. We'd never before qualified for championships of any variety. It was, I think, a Friday evening. It was a 5 o'clock kickoff. It was in Kyiv. It felt like the country was tuned in. I remember myself and Owen spoke to Kathleen McNamee on that morning's OTB AM, and there was discussion. We were talking about the goalkeepers. The Irish goalkeeper ruled out through injury, and there was an issue with the Ukraine keeper as well. And the impact that might have. And, you know, we go into the game, we're 5 points behind Germany, 6 ahead of Greece, 7 ahead of Ukraine. As I said, we'd beaten Ukraine already. Katie McCabe, you remember that free kick that she'd scored only just in the lead into that for Arsenal. And Ukraine would want to watch out, right? Because if Katie McCabe gets a free kick around the area, she's going to nail it. And we're going to, it's a matter of how much we're going to beat this team by. And it just never came to pass. And the story on the night, Ger, you mentioned earlier on there about is it a bit of luck, is it a bit of planning? And certainly when you look back at that game, luck deserted us on the night. We'd hit the crossbar. There was the missing the penalty, coming back off the crossbar. Katie McCabe had hit the crossbar on top of that as well. The horrific
comedy of errors.
Yeah, the horrific on goal. Like Anya O'Gorman, I think plays what she would have expected to be a fairly routine-ish back pass, and then the keeper just totally overshoots the runway, runs out of position. The ball goes. It was one of the most horrific OGs you're ever likely to see in international football.
So it was so much was riding on it, and so much was invested in it, and so much. It's like, as we talked about with the men's team, the Euros. Maybe, depending on how everything happens, there was a chance to qualify for a tournament where there would have been games here, and that's never going to happen again unless we share a tournament. Which, maybe the new FAI will manage to share a tournament with somebody. But it's what's lost. It's that sense of, national momentum behind women in sport, where you're actually seeing politicians stand up and say, "Why do we support GAA?" men's and women's differently? It's 3 million for the men, it's 600 grand for the women. What's the story, lads? Like, that's the easiest thing of all to fix, is funding. And then once the funding gets fixed, you see this kind of explosion. But the explosion is going to happen all around the world. So as we get better, so too will all those other countries who probably have a head start on us. They'll get better too. So you do feel that, like, there's a ship and we just jumped and fell into the water and the ship sails off.
Yeah, that's definitely a concerning thing out of it. I mean, and look, sorry, I just make this point. Like, I don't know that that's ultimately true, right? But I do know that at some point, like when we talk about luck and planning, we have to forget about the luck aspect, and we have to just make sure that we're in a position to win these games against teams we should be beating. And that isn't just to do with planning on the night, that there has to be a wider picture of... Jack Chambers gets up 3 or 4 months ago and says that he's going to march a path to the FAI, and he's going to insist that there should be equity of pay for the men's and women's team. And it's a fantastic soundbite, great quote, fantastic thing to say, that there isn't a person in the land that wouldn't have empathy for and a movement to get behind. And what has he done about it since? Absolutely nothing, as far as I'm aware. And I said at the time, and I'm more firmly of the belief now, that it's a very easy thing to level at the FAI at the minute because they're an easy target, and it might well be right. But why isn't he marching a path to the IRFU and marching a path to the Gaelic Games organisations and all the rest of them? I just think that that point about the luck versus the planning, at some point, and it's where you tie in the 20 by 20 movement and women's sport in the wider context. At some point, we need to have structures and plans in place that it isn't down to luck anymore, that these things need to happen. Yeah, all right. Let's hear from Vera Pauw, who has kind of been the star of the year in terms of her sound bites and just her football philosophy. She gave us a great interview in the middle of the year here, talking about her relationship with the legendary Rinus Michels.
No, I grew up as a boy. I'm one of a triplet with 2 brothers. My sister is 3.5 years older. So as a kid, that is your big sister, but you don't play with her. There's too big an age gap. So with my brothers, we grew up. There were no other girls in the neighborhood of our age. So we played football on the street. That's how it started, like so many of us of our age. And I could only join a club when I was 13 with dispensation, because at that age you could only start at the age of 15. But my dad wrote to the association and said, like, I cannot explain anymore that she cannot play football. So please let her play with the adults. So I played as a 13-year-old with adult women in a club. But for me, that didn't matter because I could finally play games.
Okay. So you, as a 11, 12-year-old, had no team to play for?
No. I always went with my brothers to their games. And everybody knew me. All the parents went to one side, and I could run along the line on the other side. And so I ran where the ball was. Bit sad if you think about it, but back then that was my way of having played a little bit.
That's Vera Pauw talking about growing up playing with the boys. She does, in that interview, then go on to talk about her relationship with Rinus Michels and the relationship that her husband had with Rinus Michels, and he would have been part of Dick Advocat's backroom staff. So that's kind of the football culture that Vera Pauw is part of, and is also part of Ruud Doctor's football culture. And, like, you know, in everything that's happened with the FAI, we don't really know how good a job or otherwise Ruud Doctor is doing. It's hard to measure these things.
It's very hard to measure these things. Like, on Vera Pauw, I think it's been a success story in terms of her tenure as Ireland manager at the moment. And I think she is one of the reasons why I don't necessarily agree with your point that Ireland have jumped into the water and the ship has sailed off. Ireland are going to miss the first glamorous port that ship will dock on. Just to continue that message.
Keep going. Where can you take it?
But I think Ireland are about to hop into a speedboat and power along just behind that ship and keep the distance fairly close. I think Irish football is going in the right direction. Like, you look at the individual star talent, which is what teams are founded on in terms of the allure of teams to young fans and to adult fans and to everybody who comes to a new team. Who are the individuals that people can get behind? And already you can tell the difference that the different way that people are talking about this team to previous years, which used to be a shrug of the shoulders as to who's playing for the Irish women's team, whereas now we're like, Katie McCabe, Denise O'Sullivan, are these actually world-class players? Are these players that Irish people can get behind and realise that they're watching Irish people who are operating at a world-class level or just below a world-class level? The fact that they're both in their mid-20s, the fact that Ireland came so close to qualifying for a competition, I definitely think it all points towards green shoots and that Ireland are definitely going in the right direction. They are definitely travelling behind that boat, if not on that boat. They're just not going to be in that big party in 2022 for the European Championships, which obviously is a massive shame.
It is, because they're in England, and obviously we all know from football, European Championships far more easy to qualify for a World Cup. So actually, by not qualifying for this, the knock-on impact is probably you don't end up qualifying for the World Cup because you don't get that boost of that extra time together, blah, 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 and all of a sudden it's actually 4 years down the line. And 2026 is the next time we're realistically looking at qualifying for a tournament and everything that comes with that.
It's a good point. Sorry,
go on.
Well, no, I think as well that what you're talking about is a number of different countries who are in developing stages, and of course it's going to be much more difficult to qualify for the World Cup, and the Europeans are obviously going to be the one. This was the one that got away for sure when it came to this team. I also think, though, the clubs that a few of these players are playing for, and the way that it couldn't have got much worse in many aspects of the women's game in Ireland, that there has to have been progress over the last few years. I would be confident that there are going to be more surprising, good shocks for this Ireland team over the next, whatever it's going to be, 6 years until that European Championships.
I hope you're right. And that's what we're putting in. A little bit of hope, a little bit of green shoots is what we're putting in the Time Capsule, the 2020 Time Capsule. Adrian Barry, good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, lads.
OTB AM is brought to you every morning with thanks to Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to be talking about boxing, about Katie Taylor and sports documentaries next. But first, here's one of our favourite boxing moments of the year. It's Mickey Rourke calling out Robert De Niro during his sit-down with Andy Lee.
I always took the acting very personal, like whoever I'm working with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my mentality, it's like, no, it's me against you, and I'm going to take you to school. That's why when De Niro and I worked together, it didn't go very good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite films, actually, Angel Heart.
Yeah, but he wanted me to bend down and kiss his ass, and he met the wrong guy.
Because I read something about it. The director, Alan Parker, he said that it was like a sparring session when you two would share scenes.
You know what? He's a and a crybaby. He's a and a crybaby.
Did you ever talk boxing with De Niro? Considering Raging Bull?
Raging my oh, God. No, he's a
It's Mickey Rourke in conversation with Andy Lee. You should check that out on the OTB Podcast Network. It's great stuff. Right, this is our 2020 Time Capsule here on OTBAM. We're going to talk about Katie Taylor and sports documentaries next. We've got Joseph Conroy and Philip Egan with us. You're both very welcome. We're going to start with Katie Taylor. So everybody's been asked to pick a moment. Was there one single moment this year, Phil, of she had many, many highlights?
Yeah, I think just the fact that she got the rematch with Delfine Persoon and Persoon admitted after being defeated by Katie Taylor a second time that, this was, a lot more straightforward in terms of how it was judged, and she had no complaints. Where you think back to the June 2019 where Persoon stormed out of the ring saying, it was a disgraceful decision, whereas this fight was very close. But the fact that Katie Taylor took this rematch on quite short notice because the Amanda Serrano fight had fallen through, and had learnt lessons from the first fight, and different 2020, but same old Katie Taylor, just training away in Connecticut. Some people would say she trains like it is a lockdown anyway because she's just so dedicated, and then comes along and we can't be there. You can't be in Madison Square Garden, so you're in the Matchroom garden, Eddie Hearn's back garden in Essex, and Katie Taylor still winning. And in fairness to Eddie Hearn, and when Katie Taylor made the contact with him a few years back and said, I think I can do for the professional women's game what I've done for the amateur game, you know, a lot of people would have said, really? And I think that has come to fruition. And Katie Taylor still has a few big fights left in her, but she has now made life-changing money from the pro game. And people probably thought, given the disappointment of the 2016 Olympics, that maybe the pro ranks wouldn't suit Katie Taylor, but it's been anything but that. And also as well, that fight on the 22nd of August came off the back of previous weekends of really good female boxing in terms of Rachel Ball and Shannon Courtney, and then you had Natasha Jonas and Terry Harper as well. So Katie Taylor's done exactly what she said she was going to do. Likewise, Eddie Hearn has as well.
Do you have any idea how much money she's made?
No, but she's basically made enough money that as soon as she retires, she's not going to have to worry about her future. But I'm sure, knowing Katie Taylor, how dedicated she is, I would be very surprised if she's not involved in boxing when she decides that she hasn't got any more fights left in her, whether it's coaching or something else. But I think she just loves it too much.
So what is the actual best thing now for her career? Because we've reached a level we haven't seen that many fighters ascend to, where you're there to be got at. Everybody is essentially using you to make money from the fights, and so you're the one bringing the purse, essentially. You're the one bringing the TV deal. How does she navigate this so that actually there's less jeopardy and more money for her?
Well, do you know what? I don't think it bothers Katie Taylor if there is jeopardy for these fights. I mean, taking Persoon on again, given how tough that first fight was, just shows that there's nobody out there that Katie Taylor won't fight. The only thing you would worry about is if she stepped up in weight and she fought somebody that was coming down in weight and maybe the power was an issue. Persoon actually talked about that at the second fight, because she was obviously trying to qualify for the Olympics and she had dropped weight, and then she had to put on weight to fight Katie Taylor, and she just felt that she lacked the power she had in the first fight. That you just don't get a fight where Katie Taylor's in with somebody that is too strong for her. I think of somebody like Lomachenko, who technically one of the most gifted boxers you're ever going to see, but went up against Teofimo Lopez, equally a gifted boxer, but was just too strong for Lomachenko. That was always the worry with him. So if Katie Taylor does go up and take on these more lucrative fights against some bigger opponents, will she be able to mix it? Now, I always feel watching Katie Taylor, if she sticks to boxing, there's no one that can match her. And I think she did that very well in the rematch with Persoon, where she didn't get involved in the slugfest. There was moments in the fight, but it wasn't the tear-up that you got in the first one, where those fights do not suit Katie Taylor. She's technically a better boxer than anyone.
Yeah.
Just get in and out, fight on the outside, get in, land your shots, and then get back out and make them chase you.
I feel a little bit like that about her career, though. There's boxing it's hard, and the damage that they're doing to their brains. We see this as a conversation that keeps being had in football at the moment. Like, you would definitely, if you were involved in the advisory capacity that wasn't financially, you'd be saying, maybe this is the time to walk away. Like, yeah, two more fights, one more fight.
Maybe two more fights. Obviously the Serrano fight is the one that everyone wants to see. I don't know if it's going to happen. It's nothing to do with Katie Taylor's side of things. I think Serrano and her camp have always found excuses to get out of this fight, and I know COVID came along, and that was the reason that Serrano camp didn't want this fight. That's fair enough, because at the time a lot of gyms were closed. What kind of sparring can you get in the lead up to a fight like this? Let's see what happens maybe 2021. The McCaskill fight is a fight, obviously, that can happen. It's a fight that happened before. Katie Taylor headlined a card at the York Hall, and McCaskill gave her everything, and it was a really tough fight. McCaskill, people thought at the time, she's only a part-time boxer. She's since gone on to great things, and she's obviously a weight division above Katie Taylor. That's certainly one that would be an eye-catching fight, and one we want to see. I don't think we're going to see a trilogy with Persoon, because I think Katie Taylor has proven that she's the better boxer. But
the crossover fights are the ones that might have big money.
Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, they are certainly ones that could happen. Regardless of what you think of the the Mayweather-McGregor fight, and it wasn't really a contest, it generated huge money. And I've said that obviously Katie Taylor is now starting to make life-changing money, but a crossover fight with some UFC star could just take it to a different level, where you're starting to talk about 7-figure sums for fights consistently. And then, you know, maybe Katie's in a better position to decide, yeah, I've done it all. But she has done it all.
Yeah, so which would you do?
She just loves boxing, though. The thing is, Katie Taylor must be thinking, what would I do without boxing? So, like, there's a fine line where you go in for a fight, you go in for one too many, and it mightn't end well. But I don't think we're at that stage yet, because Katie has shown in 2020 that she's still at the peak of her powers. So I think 2021 could be even better for her.
Okay, so 3 fights in 2021 or 2 fights? She's busy as a top quality fighter, far busier than you'd see many in her position being.
Yeah, I suppose it really depends on the pedigree of the opponent. Obviously, after the win over Persoon, she fights Gutierrez, and that's a fight that we all expected her to win, and she did. And, you know, does she take an opponent like that on early in the year to kind of tune up for a big one, and then maybe later in the year? But boxing, given the nature of it, and I said, look, we don't know how things are going to work out in terms of COVID. We're obviously talking of vaccines, and things look a lot brighter for 2021 than they did around March 2020. So it depends really what kind of fights that they can agree. The big ones, the likes of the Serrano fight, if it ever happened, or those fights, the crossover fights with someone from the UFC, you want crowds there. So, you know, if there's a fight like that where Eddie Hearn basically has to say to Katie Taylor, look, we can get this fight maybe in October or November, because we can have a full house. So in the meantime, you know, we'll do the fight camps in the back garden with no crowd or limited crowd.
I do wonder, so every year she finishes top of the most beloved Irish sports star. If there was a Croke Park fight, or if there was an Ireland fight, would that translate to ticket sales? It's one thing answering a survey, and then it's another spending 80 quid for everybody in the family.
Yeah, I think a lot of that would depend on the card on the night, in terms of who she's fighting, who else is on the card. You know, are we going to be a nation starved of sporting events that something like that everyone would be queuing up? Because we see what happens when things are shut down. When they open back up, we are mad for them, whether it's the queue,
Pubs,
the queue outside
outdoor
the pub,
drinking.
Outdoor drinking, if we want to go to Penny's to get our pajamas, you know,
keep them open 36 hours.
That's it. We love the fact that if
so something, what you're saying is get the tickets sold in the next lockdown.
Maybe, yeah. But as I said, like we're starved of really big Irish cards in terms of boxing. And you know, you remember those great nights of Bernard Dunn around like the point, or the O2 for the Cordoba fight, and they were really special nights, and we just don't have enough of them. And regardless of what people think of boxing, like there's an appetite there.
Yeah. There definitely is. There absolutely is. There's no doubt about that, and that's why it attracts the attention that it attracts from everybody that it attracts. Phil, good stuff. Let's move on, because we want to talk about the best documentaries and sports picks on TV over the year. Let's start with John Giles talking about discovering Netflix and The Last Dance.
Yeah, I just got it recently, John. Funny enough, the kids put it in for me. Yeah, I've watched I've watched a few of The Last Dance, mostly sports stuff from Muhammad Ali. I just find it fascinating, you know, because before you'd look at the television and you couldn't find a program that you'd like. But Netflix, there's so many on it. I don't know where to start sometimes. I find it absolutely brilliant. Really, really good.
Did you find Michael Jordan impressive, John?
Yeah. I thought his attitude to his profession was absolutely outstanding. He was never satisfied with what he did. He encouraged people, more than encouraged people around him to try and meet his standards, which were very, very, very hard to achieve. And he obviously had a gift to do what he was doing, and I think he realised that it was a gift, and he was going to make the most of it. Which, watching the documentary, he certainly did. I didn't have much interest in basketball, to be quite honest, John. till I watched this and saw the skills and slow motion and all the various things that he could do. So it was very, very impressive. And I think anybody watching it, young kids watching it, whatever sports they're in, to see the attitude that he had and his approach to his profession was absolutely brilliant.
He could be a bit nicer to his teammates, maybe. Yeah, that was John Giles giving us his thoughts on The Last Dance, which was the cultural phenomenon of 2020. And I think Joseph Conroy is going to go down as a moment that the whole world watched something maybe for the last time.
I think so. I think you've actually picked up on something there. Like, obviously, I don't think any 2020 time capsule for either global sport or the Irish sporting experience would be complete without this. But John does hesitate there a second before he starts answering. It seems like he's kind of mulling over a few things. It's like, John, it's complicated, but, you know, maybe he knows we're pushed for time. He's just going, yeah, he's a perfect professional. But, yeah, Jesus, it was something that we just kind of consumed so long ago and also just, like, devoured it. I was just looking back last night. It's actually incredible, the amount of content in that series and just the breadth of it and the moments. And I know we're quite strict today. We're picking our actual moments. I'm going to put the moments when, I don't know if you'll remember, I'll give you a quick refresher. The Isaiah Thomas clip on the iPad, where they've just been talking about the Pistons have lost, the Bulls have finally beaten them. They walk off, don't shake hands. They've got Isaiah Thomas there going, well, back then there'd been this previous incident where it happened to us. It was just kind of a thing people did. And straight away it's like, Michael, we have a clip for you here. It's Isaiah discussing the incident. He's like, yeah, I don't look at it. It's like, oh, right. Well, I was like, okay, I'll watch it. But I mean, that guy's, he's a word I'm not going to repeat on air, but there's nothing you can say to me to convince me he's not. And then you watch the clip, he's like, yeah, that guy is. He is what he is. He knows what he is.
And you had a weekly podcast out about this at the time.
Yeah, the Jordan Isaiah Thomas beef was interesting. What I found interesting about this, and what John Giles said there as well, was he's like, I'm not that interested in basketball, but I was fascinated by Michael Jordan. And I think that's probably the way this has gone, that everybody was really interested in The Last Dance. It was such brilliant production. The footage was grand in the end, but actually turned out to be about so much more than that. As Joe said, it was the iPad. The iPad was almost the star of the show rather than the 1998 unseen footage. And I just thought that there was going to be this explosion in interest in basketball, even just for a period of time afterwards. And that didn't really materialize whatsoever. I mean, television figures in the United States for the NBA Finals, I think, were down this year, in fact, despite the fact that people were stuck at home and nobody was obviously in the bubble in Disney World. Like, we talk about Maradona, for example, over the last couple of weeks and how he's much bigger than... he's not bigger than football, but he sort of transcended his sport into different aspects of world life. Michael Jordan kind of does the same thing, but in many ways he's actually bigger than basketball, and I think The Last Dance is proof of that. People aren't necessarily that interested in the NBA as a result of that, but just uber interested in Jordan and the 90s and the cultural icon that he was.
Yeah, Joseph, what else about that before we move on to some of the other documentaries that you were watching or our highlights of the year?
Just a few quick things. Agree with a lot of what Eoin's saying there. I think it's incredible seeing these footages kind of presented how they were, and but having these moments in total context where you're not just seeing a kind of 45-second YouTube clip or even seeing a classic game playing on ESPN or something. It's like you've got so much narrative embedded in these incredible moments, and like you talk about, people might get one moment like that in their career, and you've got them just like back to back to back again, layering on the meaning. So much in it, and just kind of childish stuff, like watching this guy, bully his teammates, and like that's one of the two times he gets emotional in the series, are talking about his dead father and talking about it's like, yeah, I kind of did bully them, but I bullied them because I wanted to win. I wanted them to win. I wanted them to feel what I feel. I wanted to push them. Then it's like there's no kind of why are you crying, Michael? He's like, and now we're going for a break because I'm Michael Jordan and I feel that I'm uncomfortable. I'm walking away. But other stuff as well was just the little things like the habitual bullying of Jerry Krause, who's like running this massive like global sports organization, and they're just there like making fun of his weight, making fun of his height, just a complete disdain. Yeah, just, and then there is kind of like there's the whole kind of gambit into the Olympics, the dream team as well. That's also just incredible. But yeah, there's probably, the more we talk about individual moments, the more we're probably getting bogged down in it. But as well, just one last thing, it's just like I mentioned, the breadth of the project. Could you imagine the kind of two things we have are the laptop, as Alan mentioned, which was kind of something that's become kind of iconic and associated with it, but also the kind of use of time and the kind of playing and the merging of the final season and going back to these kind of pivotal moments. Like, imagine even if you could see that timeline visually, like what they must have had in the paper edit. It's just incredible. And yeah, I really think they nailed it. And there's a reason it wasn't just the absence of anything else happening in the world. It's just an incredible document, this incredible figure.
That definitely helped. We've got like a minute left here. Give some honourable mentions to some other sports docs.
Kind of flip it, talking about kind of like such a legend of the sport and kind of doing testament to his great achievements. I think Sunderland, Till I Die in general, is a very underrated franchise, even given the amount of acclaim it's got. Moments in the second series, which came out this year as well, are just incredible. Just complete lack of self-awareness. If anyone wants to look at it, the first kind of 3 or 4 episodes up until the transfer window, where it's like just complete culture clash, people not understanding what's happening at this failing club. You also have this amazing striker who they keep cutting to interviews where it's like, oh, so is your future at Sunderland? He's like, oh, well, you know, yeah, I'm for now, I'm loving Sunderland. And obviously he leaves. It all turns into a total mess. Quick other honourable mentions, Jose Mourinho, also underrated, potential 2020 MVP, both in kind of doing his Jose Mourinho kind of grand tribute act in All or Nothing, and just sort of, a lot of that's kind of, you're sort of seeing it, how it's being presented, and you're wondering how much editorial control there is. But even if it is the way he's trying to present himself, that in itself is incredibly loaded and incredibly entertaining and just an incredible thing to watch in front of you. And then just 2 last ones, the Lance documentary. One of the best opening scenes I've seen in a documentary, where it's like our subject, who's famous for doing that thing where he lied about that thing for ages and then got in trouble with it. You sit down with him and he's like, oh, I'm not going to mess with you. I'm going to tell you my truth. Not the truth, my truth. So we're just going to kind of establish the subjectivity of truth and facts off the bat and just kind of crack on with this thing. Another fascinating 2 odd hours of TV. So there are a couple more, but now we're probably pushed for time. One last one I'll give a mention to is The Last Ride, which is kind of a sister piece to The Last Dance, but it's about The Undertaker. His last fights, it's a 4-part series, and just kind of to complete the circle, The Last Dance Crew's new project is a multi-part series on Vince McMahon for Netflix, which kind of, rounds off nicely, and that's one to look out for down the line.
All right, well, no doubt we'll talk about it when it's due. Good stuff. Joseph Conroy, Phil Egan, thanks very much for that. This is the 2020 Time Capsule here on OTB AM. We're picking the moments that we'll all remember from the year of 2020. John Duggan's going to join us next to talk about some of the sporting legends we lost this year.
How will you remember Jack, Mick? He gave the country some marvellous days as Republic of Ireland manager.
I remember him as the bloke that gave me the best time of my life in football.
You were an Irish international before he came along. What do you remember of your early interactions with him, Mick?
When he first came into the job?
Yeah.
He made it plain and simple what he wanted. And, I know he sometimes gets remembered as this long ball game, but he was very tactically aware, Jack, and he was the one that turned a team of, a group of good players into a team that was a real force to be reckoned with, and a team that qualified for 88, 1994, or the country that did. But he galvanised the team. He made it simple. He knew what to do. He knew how to do it. He knew what the opposition didn't like. And he simplified it. And it just made it, I said, he turned some of the good players that we had into really great players, international players. The team spirit was incredible. The willingness to work for each other, the togetherness. And that was, Jack created that, and that was with him, but that was with the country as well. That was with the fans. The sense of belonging to that squad, to that team, and that time of the fans and the country was just amazing.
So that was Mick McCarthy in conversation with John Duggan after the passing of Jack Charlton. On air that day was a surreal experience, John. Was it in a weird way enjoyable? Jack's life, obviously, because it was a life fully lived, it was far more of a celebration than a shock.
Yes, Ger and Eoin, we got the news at 9:30 that morning, and then everything goes out the window, as it should. The whole show we prepared, gone. And we had to just try and get as many people who were generous enough to give their time to speak about Jack and you have to get it right. And Nathan did this amazing montage, and that started off the show. But I was thinking about the people we were speaking to that day. John Giles, a league winner with Leeds, who played with Jack. Mark Lawrence, a league winner with Liverpool, European Cup winner. Kevin Sheedy, a league winner with Everton. Mick McCarthy, you just heard there, a league winner with Celtic. Kevin Moore, an All-Ireland winner with the Dubs, an FA Cup winner with Manchester United. Jason McAteer, who played for Liverpool. Ray Houghton, who won a league title with Liverpool and bookended the Jack era. These were quality players. And it's funny, Jack's passing, which was not unexpected, but was always a shock, came at a time when we kind of gone through this whole nostalgia binge. The Boys in Green documentary on RT television. We did our World Cup Revisited show on OTB here as well. And there was a text I got in from a listener when we did the Italia 91, which is about 2 months before Jack passed. And this was the text. It was Keith from Newbridge here, 48 years old. After O'Leary scoring the penalty, I went out to the pandemonium in Clondalkin village. I was surfing on a car roof when I fell off and a girl picked me up. She's my wife, Amanda. We're together 30 years in July. I'm bawling here. Irreplaceable memories. And for me, Jack Charlton was the leader of what I would argue was the biggest national celebration we had since independence. And that's not an insubstantial legacy for somebody who came here, fluked the job. Bob Paisley was meant to get the job. And then Jack, through the fact that he had credibility as a World Cup winner with England in 1966, played with Leeds United and was able to have that unusual style of play, the Charles Hughes philosophy, when he went to Mexico in '86 and he saw the put him under pressure style of play. And he just gave us a belief that we didn't have. We might have had better players in the past. We had a belief, though, with Jack. And also that feeling, Ger and Eoin, that something always good would happen. We'd always find a way of getting to the next level.
John, could I ask, when you were doing World Cup Revisited, especially around 1994, and kind of listening to people talk about Jack Charlton, reading about Jack Charlton, is there anything more you understood or something new that came to mind as a result of the events of this summer, as a result of the nostalgia boom and, of course, the passing of Jack himself?
You get the sense of Jack being quite a kind human being, but a stubborn human being, but a kind human being. I think he has described it himself, Eoin, as be a dictator, but a nice one. Like David O'Leary and Liam Brady might argue that they didn't get the best of look at Jack Charlton's management. But Paul McGrath was treated very well as a human being. And you hear all the stories you wouldn't have known maybe about journalists, like going up and having a drink with him in his hotel room, that kind of thing. The fact that like he was trying to get a cigarette off somebody in the stand when we were having the penalty shootout against Romania, these kind of things. But you're also you're getting a lot of texts in from listeners that had written to Jack as maybe as kids or whatever, and never thought they'd get a reply, and then they get a reply and actually with Jack's signature on it. And that kind of generosity and the fact that he became an adopted Irishman. And we were talking about cultural icons, I think. Like Michael Jordan is a cultural icon, say, for basketball. Jack Charlton was an Irish cultural icon, is one. Diego Maradona is a global cultural sporting icon. I do honestly believe that gegenpressing has really helped in the reclamation project too. I think all sports careers end in failure. So the night in Anfield where we get hammered by a young Dutch team where Kluivert absolutely kills us, where that team breaks up and they hand over to Mick McCarthy, and there's like a period where we actually should have been qualifying for tournaments because the young players coming through were good enough to get us there, but he wasn't experienced enough at that stage. Jack's reputation had come off the high of us thinking about 1990, and then the assumption, because we qualified for another World Cup in 2002, that this was how life was going to be like. But actually, reaching the quarterfinals of the World Cup is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Like, in all of our lifetimes, we're never going to do that again in football. Like, it's not going to happen, barring an absolute miracle, right? And I do think that, like, the notion of Charlton as somebody who had a different style of play to what was going on at the time being a positive, because you remember the TV commentary at the time was like, very negative. Very negative. Like an absolute disgrace. Football. Yeah. 116 teams entered that 1990 World Cup. We were in the top 8. And we were knocked out by the hosts. We were never going to beat the hosts in Rome. Think about it. If we managed to do so... Watching the Maradona documentary the other night, you just think how different the world would have been. Maradona would never have served his 18-month ban for cocaine because he wouldn't have knocked the... Yeah. They would have been like, they all would have been behind him at that stage. Naples would have closed ranks. And Maradona might have changed history. Yeah, you never know. I would agree with that, because like in that campaign for 1990, that World Cup, we bullied Spain off the park. The stylish Spanish team at Lansdowne Road, I think it was in March, I think rugby being played there. But teams did not understand. Like the Dutch in '88 were panicking until they had that fluke goal from Wim Kieft. They didn't understand, as you say, it was all about getting the ball up high and getting players running into the channels up high. And that had not been done at an international level.
And they put them under pressure, which I think, like, when you think about it, in all Irish sporting terms, there's very few Irish sports people who are the absolute primo technicians in their entire sport. Like in Katie Taylor's amateur style, it was a pressure style as well. There was definitely, she would overwhelm fighters. As a professional, she's using her technical side. But apart from that, everybody else is, let's start a fight and see what happens. Let's be aggressive. Let's be in your face. Like,
I can only maybe think
away from that.
Of Harrington maybe as somebody who's completely technically and driving his way to winning majors. But yeah, like it took about 5 to 6 years for teams to work Ireland out. And the game for me that when it all went wrong was Poland away for the '92 qualifiers, when we had our best team playing our best football. Should have beaten England at Wembley. Yeah. Drew with them in Dublin, but Poland were 3-1 up, and that was the moment, I think. And then the Giant Stadium, there were a lot of factors in the States. The heat, I think, was a huge thing. Like, we couldn't deal with the heat down in Florida. But after beating, that was really the end of the Charlton era in a way, the 1-0 win over Italy in the Giant Stadium. Once again, it was the first game they'd played since Italia 90, and that's one thing sometimes when life moves on quickly. But the tributes were really heartfelt. It was a strange day, and obviously we continued the coverage all week that week. But everybody came out in droves to pay tribute for Jack, and I really felt it was the end of an era, because I suppose it's against the backdrop of everything that's happened in the FAI, the backdrop of maybe our worst team that we've had since the early 1970s, and it is a bit of a tinge of nostalgia, and also it's for people who weren't around for it. I suppose there's a bit of FOMO about it, because we're all telling everybody because we lived through it how great it was, and it's been a touch of that again with Diego now. Yeah,
look, absolutely with Maradona. I mean, it's a month on at this stage since he passed away, and I think I don't know. It's like, that was just this mad global outpouring of a convulsion of love for him as a footballer, and then the other side of his life, that all was teased out as well. I don't know, do we want to talk about this again? Like, obviously we did a good bit at the time.
Yeah, I just think that Diego, for anybody once again who remembers living through that time, Diego for me was lost youth. Diego was something that I hadn't seen in a poor 1980s Irish household, which was exotic son, amazing skill. And you couldn't really dream of being a footballer like that, but you can maybe dream about getting involved in the industry and talking about it, which is what we're doing today. And once again, Pele, Messi, Ronaldo, none of them really were global cultural icons, I don't think, in the way Maradona was, because Maradona broke through, came to Spain. When football was really, I think, when Havelange came into FIFA, and people can say what they want about FIFA, and there's a lot of reasons too, but football became quite commercial. It became, more accessible to the global TV market. The sponsors got involved, and the '82, '86 World Cups, we began to see a World Cup more in tune with the way society was going, with the LA Olympics, that kind of thing. And Maradona then just burst onto it, and we didn't see him that often, but when we did, you're thinking, oh my God, this guy is doing something that like the players you'd be watching every week in the English League, Hoddle, Lineker, Barnes, Maradona was even a level then above them. And his passing, once again, unexpected, it's a shock, but it's not a surprise. But yeah. He just, I'm just wondering when the talent leaves the body, how somebody like Maradona would feel when you have such outrageous talent at your disposal. How do you feel? What fills the void? I don't think anything really did ever. No. With Maradona, I think that's why he's passed relatively young in those terms. But I think it's something we fell in love with, and it's a love that endures. And for me, I always kind of blocked out the other things in his life, because all I can remember is the way he played the game, which is why we still want to get on a plane and go to see Lionel Messi play, or go to Man United, or go to Spurs, because we're hoping that somebody will do something out of the blue, like Maradona could do on a regular basis, to brighten up our day, and for us also to get the social currency to talk about it.
Kobe Bryant is the other one that is kind of a global superstar. That was January 26, 2020. He was in a helicopter accident with a bunch of other people, including some children and his own daughter. Was it one daughter or two daughters?
I'm not sure.
Owen?
One.
Okay, his daughter and maybe one of her friends as well. Horrific, really, just that that those lives on that helicopter ended in that way. And again, there was this kind of very interesting reaction to it. There was certainly people who did not want to hear about anything that Kobe Bryant had been involved in that wasn't glorifying him. But Kobe Bryant also has a legacy that there's a very significant sexual assault allegation there, and the details of that were pretty horrific. And so again, that was always also something that was, you know, in the aftermath of people dying, how much of their lives do you hold them accountable for?
Well, Kobe Bryant, the difference with Kobe Bryant, say Maradona or Jack Charlton, is that Kobe Bryant is very real and he's very here and then he's not here. And it's a very sudden thing that he could be, you know, doing an interview, or he could be talking about The Last Dance and how that was received in America, whatever, and then he's not here. Does it get airbrushed out, guys? I don't know what you think when somebody should we be dealing with the aspect of everybody's life when they pass, not just the sport? I think it's a good question.
Yeah, I think you probably have to if you're going to be honest about these things. Like, you know, no one's life is the Instagram pose. It's all the stuff around it. So maybe there is a metaphor there, and actually dealing with these issues when people do die, as opposed to like, oh, you can't say that, the body's not cold. It's like, well, actually, you know what? That's the precise moment where you're holding somebody accountable for their life's work, particularly when it's a global superstar like this.
Well, I think with Michael Jackson got that appraisal, and maybe in sport we haven't seen that, but Michael Jackson got that well. There were things that there were definitely questions to answer. But has it happened in sport to that degree? Possibly not. I'm not a big basketball fan. Michael Jordan got me into basketball this year because of following the Last Dance and fascinated by...
You and Jazzy both?
Yeah, me and Jazzy, yeah. That's the only reason I asked him the question, because otherwise I wouldn't have a clue. And once again, what struck me about Michael Jordan was the sneakers. That was the one thing I kind of like, you know, the sneakers. This is the merchandising, the global stuff. Him going to France and being completely, you know.
And how The Last Dance kicks it all off again. Like, it's just like, oh yes, another billion, thanks very much.
And what I'm talking about, like, once again, when Kobe Bryant passing away, and like, obviously, cinematography and, you know, television now is so, like, something feels very real and then it's gone. The 1997, 98, it feels like yesterday when you're watching, like, you know, Michael Jordan, as opposed to, say, when you're watching Maradona, which does feel like from another planet, from a different time.
Yeah, it's true. The 86 to 97, there is a significant difference. Eoin, anything to say about Kobe?
Yeah, well, I just think on the grey area that you deal with in the aftermath of a death, it's very interesting that, you know, I think it was especially true after Kobe's death, that the point that you made there, don't say anything, the body's not even cold yet, sort of thing. That sort of discourse is a little bit damaging on so many levels, where if you don't have those conversations in the immediate aftermath, or if that conversation is not had in the immediate aftermath of a death like Kobe's, when does the conversation then happen? And at what point does a lack of that conversation actually lead to further airbrushing of somebody's image, where, you know, Kobe gets held up as a hero, and people who are perhaps coming to a little bit more Bryant information in the aftermath of his death aren't getting the full suite of facts about his life? I think it's vital that a 3D picture is painted of everybody when they die, and these conversations happen. So I'd firmly be on that side of the fence. It's like, it feels like 4 years ago, to be honest, when Kobe died. What was very striking about it was just how it affected every basketball player so deeply. It did seem that they saw this guy as a father figure more so than Jordan. That it seemed that a lot of people, granted he was a younger man than Jordan, a lot of the current players would have played with him, but it felt that Kobe was much more of a mentor to all of them than Jordan ever would have been. Jordan was a cold-blooded killer. I mean, Kobe Bryant, he was of course ruthless as well, but not on Michael Jordan's level. Michael Jordan was a different character altogether, and I think he is separate from basketball because of that. I don't think he enjoys the camaraderie that a lot of basketball players have with one another post-career that Kobe would have had with a lot of his former teammates. So you're right, it's interesting looking at the talk around Jordan and the talk around Kobe. Of course, people will speak more warmly about somebody after they die, but I think even last year people would have spoken a bit more warmly about Kobe regardless.
All right, good stuff. John Duggan, thanks very much for that, and Happy New Year to you too, sir.
A Happy New Year, Ger, and I hope we'll know when this is over, guys, when Cheltenham is normal again.
Which, you know, could be this March.
Hopefully.
Right, OTB AM is brought to you every morning with thanks to Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the morning ahead and indeed the year ahead. I hope you have a good night tonight, socially distancing and all that kind of stuff. Let's move on because Sheahan Hannon joins us next to talk about the moments that he wants to put in our 2020 time capsule. Here's one of them. Sam Bennett, who made history and won the final stage of the Tour de France, securing the green jersey. He joined us that Monday morning on OTB AM to look back on an extraordinary afternoon in Paris.
I suppose, in one sense, yeah, the pressure, it builds when you don't finish the job off. You always want to finish the job off when you get that support. But the funny thing is, the biggest pressure that came for me this year, and it was something kind of new to me, was I got some incredible support from Irish fans and people at home. But it was the pressure of expectation that was new to me. And at one point that was almost crippling, and you nearly lose your legs. But after a few stages, I got used to it, and yeah, I really started to enjoy it, and I really want to thank everybody for the support at home in Ireland.
Was that after you got the green jersey that you kind of noticed that first?
I think when I started, the first few stages I was pretty close, and then I think things started gathering more momentum in Ireland. And then I got to stage win, and that, I think, yeah, when the tears and everything came out, I think that was the pressure as well coming out.
Yeah, Sam Bennett, like an unbelievable ambassador for Irish sport and for cycling and green jersey, and something that we all really needed at that time, Shane. Shane Hannon, good morning to you, by the way. Happy New Year.
Morning, lads. Yeah, I think it's... you were asking me to pick some of the favourite moments, sporting moments of 2020, and Sam Bennett is probably one of the better moments of the last 10 years from an Irish perspective. I mean, when you consider Sean Kelly was the last Irishman to leave Paris in green in 1989, and when you listen to him talk there about the crippling expectation, that kind of sums up what Irish people put on their sports people, especially individual sports people. If you think of Shane Lowry, if you think of Ken Doherty, if you think of Katie Taylor, individual sports people have this pressure that they can't relay to team members. They have to just cope with it, and Sam Bennett coped with the pressure of all of us watching him this summer immaculately. Okay. And it has to be one of the greatest sporting moments of the last 10 years from an Irish perspective.
Well, he's up against the greatest sprinter of all time in terms of the Tour de France. So Sagan is as good as it's ever been, has been as winning and as dominant as it's ever been, and he's lived in the shadow of him for the last number of years. And then to go and blitz him the way he did was like, wow.
Yeah, and like Sagan, three-time world champion, 7 of the previous 8 green jerseys were his. I think people, not into cycling might not realise the complete sheer and utter dominance that Peter Sagan has, and he happens to be able to climb as well as sprint. So he's picking up points on the Tour de France in areas where, ordinary green jersey contenders just aren't. And when you saw, it was mathematically impossible for Sagan to catch him leading into Paris, but coming down the Champs-Elysees, and Sam Bennett he was giving it his all, and Sagan had given up at that point, but it was just beautiful to watch. And the emotion as well. I guess we all kind of fell in love with Sam Bennett a little bit because of the TV interviews, and I think there was one interview after he won one of his stages where the interviewer was telling him, no, you've done it, you have done it. And he was clearly getting very emotional, crying as well. And there was the famous video of his grandfather, 89-year-old Pat Cashin in Clonmel. I think Tip FM had gained access to his home to watch the final stage with him. And Pat is there, wearing his mask. Ordinarily, he would have been in Paris watching his grandson come home to victory. But such an emotional video.
Yeah,
and he's
you know what?
Emotional.
That's it. That's the moment of the year. That is the best thing that happened of all the stuff that was good because most of the stuff that happened this year was shit. But that's the stuff that was good that happened. That I'm like, yeah, that should be in our time capsule. That's the moment. Good man, you win.
Yeah. And Sam Bennett even apologising for being a crybaby, and we're all crying watching him going, don't even dream of apologising, because he's brought a moment of joy, and the fact that it was the maillot vert, the green jersey as well, just made it all the more iconic a moment. And to see his grandfather and to see them saying, "You've won, Sam, you've won," in such a participation sport as well. There's so many middle-aged men in lycra and middle-aged women in lycra across Ireland, mammals I think they call them. Jerry, you're probably one of them. But this is a worldwide, global sport. This is not a sport that, a couple of people play here. We're not playing tiddlywinks here. This is cycling. This is a worldwide sport, and Sam Bennett is at the very peak of it. So it has to be one of the moments of the year, one of the moments of the decade.
Wow, I just lift you up with this, and then shots fired, collateral damage, bodies, corpses everywhere. Thanks. Good man, Shane.
Are you middle? I was actually just about to make that point, though, not about the middle-agedness, but about the wider societal thing that this is, that like, I think that there's no reason why Ireland has had a string of successful cyclists down through the decades. I think a reason for that is that there's a lot of good cyclists in this country. But I think this year in particular, with people being shut out of the gyms, being shut out of team sports, a lot of people got on the bike. I would have thought the two of you were people who certainly got on the bike. The two of you did a run and ride earlier on in the year, and I think you're two of very, very many people who did that this year, whether it was running or cycling or sea swimming. They were the three. That was your triathlon this year of sport, where nothing was happening, but people actually got out and got a little bit more active than ever, and I think it was sort of fitting on that front.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just to finish on that one, is he grew up in Belgium. He was born in Flanders, but he's indescribably Irish. Bradley Wiggins, in that famous interview, said we can almost consider him British. And then in response, Sam Bennett says, I came back before I started primary school in Carrick-on-Shire, went to college in Carrick. I grew up in Ireland and both my parents are Irish, so I'm fully Irish, don't worry. So I think shutting down Bradley Wiggins made us love Sam Bennett even more.
Well, look, I mean, we should start just claiming randomers and seeing how that goes. Other stuff that we need to talk about in terms of your own personal moments, and also Ronnie O'Sullivan was the other big sports story that you were intensely tuned into, because there was definitely an argument that Stephen Hendry's the greatest snooker player of all time because he's got the most titles, and that argument is still, you can still make that, but Ronnie's catching him.
He is. He's big time catching him. And August 14th was probably the pinnacle of my sporting summer, in that it was the final day of the two World Snooker Championship semi-finals at the Crucible behind closed doors this year, unfortunately. But Anthony McGill lost out to Karen Wilson 17-16. And then Ronnie O'Sullivan beat Mark Selby 17-16. So both semi-finals went to a decider. And I spent the entire 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever it was, in front of the TV. I spent that entire day in front of the TV because Anthony McGill in that semi-final, he led 5-1. Then it was 8-all. Karen Wilson then led 13-10. McGill came back and led 16-15. And then the final frame had it all. It was one of the most incredible final frames of snooker we've ever seen, probably since the 85 black ball final between Dennis Taylor and Steve Davis. And then Ronnie, as you mentioned, 6th time winning the World Snooker Championship. But the semi-final win against Mark Selby was out of this world. And Selby and Ronnie have that little kind of dislike for each other, probably because they're both at the pinnacle of their sport. But snooker really needs Ronnie O'Sullivan, and we saw that during the summer. He kind of rubbed a few people up the wrong way, saying he'd probably have to lose an arm and a leg to fall outside the top 50. We had Ken Doherty talking on this very show during the summer, saying he is a hero to these players. I don't know whether they will still think he is a character or look up to him, but the reality is Ronnie O'Sullivan is 45 this Saturday. He turned 45 this year, and yet he's still at the very top of the sport. So I think that day, specifically the final day of the World Snooker semi-finals this year, has to be among the greatest moments of sport this year.
All right, very quickly, we're almost completely out of time. Talk to us about Novak Djokovic. Oh, gotta really feel, my heart went out to poor Novak Djokovic this year. What a clown.
Novak Djokovic had a pretty tough year, didn't he? He organised the tournament in the middle of the pandemic, the Adria Tour. He denied being an anti-vaxxer, but then also says he's not totally for them either. And generally just rubbed people up the wrong way. Novak Djokovic, he tries to be liked. He really, really tries to be liked. But you'd have to say his legacy's been a little bit damaged this year. You see, for the last 20 years, Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal having very little negative publicity surrounding them. And yet, in 1 year, Novak Djokovic has managed to really rain the heavens down upon him, because The US Open was just an extraordinary moment. When he hit the line judge, he was the top seed, disqualified from the tournament. This, of course, after he accidentally hit the line judge in a fit of anger during his fourth round match against Spain's Pablo Carreño Busta. So he hit the lineswoman in the neck or the head, it appeared, and then he pleaded on court. He begged almost for 10 minutes on the court, saying, you have a game penalty, a set penalty, many options here. And then he started saying she doesn't have to go to the hospital for this, and really just rubbed salt into the wounds. He was undefeated in 2020 up to this point. So that has to be one of the most extraordinary and memorable sporting moments of this year, lads. I think.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you've got 30 seconds to tell us about how amazing the Formula One season or Formula One year has been for one person in particular.
Yeah, you spoke earlier this year about the Romain Grosjean accident, and what a moment that was. The fact that he managed to survive that crash at speeds of 53G is testament to how Formula One and the FIA have improved. But it also highlighted how dangerous this sport is, and you can't think for one second that Formula One is routine. Lewis Hamilton, he equaled Michael Schumacher's all-time record of Formula One title wins, and he spoke after that crash. He says, "Wow, the risk we take is no joke," and it is no joke. And Lewis Hamilton this year, this is a guy who is Marmite for some. People love him and people hate him. But what he's done this year is quite extraordinary. He's equalled his hero, Michael Schumacher. This is a guy who grew up on a Stevenage council estate. He's not from the usual privileged background of some Formula One drivers, but what he's done for the Black Lives Matter movement as well has to be commended. He's not only worn the T-shirts and taken the knee, but he's raised awareness for it, and every opportunity he gets, he brings it up in interviews. So what he's done generally for the sport, Lewis Hamilton, whether you love him or hate him, he's level with Michael Schumacher. He's going to probably take over Michael Schumacher next year and winning his 8th Formula One world title. So it has to be commended, whether you love him or hate him. All
right, Shane, good stuff. Loving the tash. I can't believe you kept it on for the whole month of December as well. Good man yourself.
I know, yeah.
Happy New Year.
We have to keep it lit, lads. Happy New Year to you both.
Happy New Year to you. Right, we're moving on to the final moments for the 2020 OTB AM Time Capsule. Colin Boog and Tommy Rooney are joining us next to talk about some of the underdog moments in the GAA season and how club players finally got their summer of football. First, Kieran Donaghy reacting to one of the shocks of the year on OTB AM.
Yeah, well, look, the world is not in a normal place, to be quite honest with you. 2020 has been a shambles from the get-go. I think if the world was normal, Begley goes through, he sticks the goal. Tony Brosnan from 14 yards or 21 yards doesn't hit the post and chips it over the bar. Shawnee O'Shea slots his free from 21 yards in the first half as well. Maybe Clifford slots the 2 frees that were so unlike him. Maybe his goal chance goes in. And if all that happens, Kerry win by 12 points. And when you say that, it's not been in jest, it's just looking at the facts of it. And look, Kerry got lots of things wrong, loads out in the pitch and obviously stuff on the line yesterday. But when you just look at the brass taxes and you look at the misses that are so out of the ordinary, for whatever reasons, we don't know. But if you put them simple kind of chances, and I'm talking about Dave Moran's 2 kicks as well. Dave is a fantastic kicker of the ball. When he kicked both of them, yeah, the second one maybe time I would have been kind of like, was it needed? But they're 30 yards out for a guy who kicks them, very regularly for Kerry and for his club Strand Road. So, if that happens, Kerry win by 12, but that's when the world is normal, Ger, but it's not. We're in 2020 and mad things happen.
Yes, they do, and the mad things didn't stop happening then. Colin Boog, how are you? Cork's finest.
Hiya lads, that was beautiful there now listening to Kieran.
Tommy Rooney, how are you?
Hi folks, how you doing? Happy New Year.
Have you recovered from the shellacking that Meath took from the Dubs yet, Tommy, or is that still a sore point?
Oh God, jeez, that was a long time ago, Ger. We're trying to get over it in Meath. We're doing our very best. It's been a tough couple of weeks.
Colin, to go back to you for that moment, that brief shimmering moment, which it turned out was an oasis in the desert, but actually it was one of those ones from the Warner Brothers cartoons where it wasn't real and you end up eating sand. What just bring us back to that moment. We'll let you have the joy before we talk about the tip game.
Yeah, thank you. Because 2020 has been a small, dark, grey room, but then suddenly 2 shining bright lights came through the curtain of the year. And it all comes back to being the underdog. So I actually have a latest one, which is Waterford beating Kilkenny in the All-Ireland hurling semi-final, that comeback, for being 9 points down after half an hour, 7 points down at half-time, and to win it by 4 points. Now, I have a vested interest in Waterford, but that was an amazing moment because I was sitting on the seat, the exact seat that I was sitting on exactly 20 days prior. Exactly 20 days prior, when in the Munster semi-final in football in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, in injury time of extra time, Mark Keane scores that wonder goal against Kerry. And then there's silence on Twitter from a certain somebody until Eoin Sheahan tweets a 4-letter word, pain. Well, it was just joy from where I was sitting, because I just screamed the house down. And for so many reasons, right, for that moment. Like, Sean Meehan breaks the line, he breaks through Kerry, past 3 players. It's 13-12 to Kerry. It's the last play of the game. And where everyone's shouting to Meehan, shoot, use your left foot. What are you doing? But he recycles possession, gives it to Damien Gore, gets it back, recycles to Luke Connolly, who, by the way, was superb. He, 2 minutes before the end of full time, he scored a great outside of the right foot point, similar to actually what Michael Quinlivan did to Cork in the subsequent final for Tip. So Connolly scored that great point, scored a beautiful free kick 4 minutes before this moment. You would describe his play as being composed, the most composed player on the pitch at that point. Right up until this play, when the ball was recycled to him, and he hit the ultimate hit and hope Hail Mary at exactly 21 minutes and 1 second. He hit the ball so high that the ball landed at 21 minutes and 6 seconds. That's 5 seconds in the air. 5 seconds where Shane Ryan did not come out to clear the ball, or Tommy Walsh did not win the tussle, and Mark Keane did. And there was just that moment, a split second before the ball dropped, where all the ills of 2020 looked like it was going to disappear in one beautiful Sambuca shot of a moment where it looked like Keane was going to win it. And there's actually a moment, where about 20 yards back, Sean White for Cork starts celebrating. If you look back in the clip, I'm sure you've looked back in it loads of times. If you look back, Sean White puts his arms in the air. This split second before the ball drops, Keane catches it, swivels past Walsh, smashes it past Ryan, subsequently smashes any Kerry hope of an All-Ireland revenge against Dublin. And Cork have this moment where we could win Munster for the first time since 2012. It's 10 years after the last All-Ireland. Is Cork football back? And then if it's in a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment, the next scene, Cork lose the Tip. Yeah, we had that moment. We had that moment, and it was just so beautiful. And the thing about it, Ger, Owen and Tommy, is that when the ball went in, I just let out this guttural, involuntary scream. And it was, it was Sunday night in November, the 8th of November. It was pissing it down in Cork. Like, we lost footage from our
Yeah, we know.
But in that one moment, everything went away. And then the sad thing was, when the adrenaline wore off later that night, I realised that's the first time I celebrated all year. It's the first thing I've been happy about all year long. But it was worth it. It was beautiful.
It's been a long year. There's been some bad moments, but the thing that has kept me warm and cozy at night for the last month and a half has been the scene of Conor Sweeney lifting the Munster Cup. The absolute small-timeness that we've just heard from Colin Boohey there is actually jaw-dropping. Celebrating a Munster semi-final win with the poxiest goal you're ever likely to see. You had to borrow a professional athlete for you to beat a Kerry team that didn't even show up on the day.
Mitchelstown finest.
Carry on here. 2 months later, this is like Mayo going on about beating Dublin in 2013. 2012, my apologies, when they went on and actually got beaten in the All-Ireland final by Donegal. Except this is the Munster Championship. Nobody cares, Colin. I don't...
this is a sporting moment.
Semi-final, big whoop. It's going to be reversed again next year. You have to follow that moment up with at least the Munster title. You're going home and packing your bags with a Division 3 title this year. Good man on your silverware is all I'm going to say.
That's what a moment is all about, Owen. What was that character called in The Commitments? Joey the Lips Fagan, right? And in one of the last scenes is he by the canal and he says, the band didn't work out, they broke up. And he said, it's more beautiful this way. It's poetry. And if you look at that moment, like Connolly
No, it's not better.
He didn't know what he was doing with it. He was getting frustrated with me, and he was like, "What are you doing? Would you take this match into a shootout, please?" So he took the ball, and it was such a hit and hope. It was such a Hail Mary that if you look back in the footage, both of his feet leave the ground. All technique is last. Like, I actually don't know how that ball did not go out of play, because it looked like all the way up, it looked like it was going out. But like, Eoin, it was actually a community moment, if you bear with me. Like, this brought all of us together, because as that ball soared into the Cork night sky, you know, it was following on the trend of 2020, giving the world a lecture of, you know, you've all lost the run of yourselves, and, you know, this is what happens, and you all have to stay at home now. And then as 2020 left the room, after giving out to all of us, it said, hold on, I'll give you this moment. And the ball drops. And everybody wanted Mark Keane to catch that ball, except you, Eoin. Everybody wanted it. It was amazing, because I would have loved to have a split screen on my reaction versus your reaction. And that's what sport is all about. And also, it was Sunday night. Like, the fear had struck in. It's like a November rainy Sunday night. And it got, you know, the collective heart rate of the country just soared.
Look, that is all true. He's right. Oh, and he's right. He's right about this. You're right about it being small time to complete banging on about it 4 months later. But actually, they may as well, because that's the point of sporting rivalry. Tommy, come on, give us some sense here.
So my sporting moment is the moment that Jordan Morris slipped the ball to Matthew Costello in the 36th minute of the Leinster. I'm only joking. I'm not going to go there, lads. I'm not going to go there. We're not small time in Meath, are we? I didn't talk us up after that semi-final win. I suppose my sporting moment, it's very difficult to pick one, lads, because first of all, I want to say congratulations on getting through this show. Well done. It's a New Year's Eve special, looking back on the moments of the year. How on earth you were able to pick moments in a year like 2020 says a lot about you. I'm supposed to be talking about the club championship here, and it's very difficult to pick the one moment, because it kind of mirrored the year in a lot of ways. There were so many different stages and I suppose procedures and different types of feelings that the club championship brought about. It was great to have it in a lot of ways, looking back on it now. I was part of a lucky few, I suppose, who got to play club football this summer. And I think a lot of people didn't get to play the sport that they wanted to do, or didn't get to go to the dance classes that they wanted to go to, or the acting classes that they wanted to for a lot of time this year. And the club GAA was ran off in a really good way on the pitch. And I suppose it gave us hope throughout the year that we could do normal things again. But yeah, like it kind of happened at a couple of stages. There was the early part of lockdown when we were all on Zoom classes, and God, I don't know whether we're going to go back to that again, but they were a tough couple of weeks, but they probably kept a lot of people going. It was something different in the quizzes. You were doing bloody exercises on Zoom and whatever, and it kept you going, and people were able to build up a bit of team spirit, and then got a bit of hope that there was going to be matches this summer. And I don't know how, I'd say a lot of people felt in different ways, but I had a lot of questions entering the pitch the first couple of times that I went out there in 2020. What happens if my man's spitting in the corner? Happened in a couple of games where the lads are marking just as a habit that he's spitting, and you're there looking at him going, what's going on here? Am I allowed to be near him? Am I allowed to be 2 yards away?
Did you punch him?
No, I didn't. I actually didn't say anything, just in the off chance that the saliva may be directed in my direction. So I had it. No, like he wasn't spitting at me. It was just a habit he had to be spitting into the corner, out of the corner of his mouth. And it just kind of happens. But like what we learned was that we were able to actually engage in outdoor activities. And I think it's evident that on the pitch anyways, that there was very little transmission. Not to be talking about words like transmission and the virus on New Year's Eve to bring in the mood, but I think it was a very worthy experience in a lot of ways. I'll be honest, when my own club got knocked out, we were sickened. We had a really good start. We seemed to have, I don't know, we'd be right underdogs anyway. And I think we kind of felt like, geez, we've got something building here. And we won our first two games, probably against the odds. We had to win our last game to get into a semi-final. And we got beaten in the last 10 minutes. I won't talk about the black cards that we were given, but we kind of fell short in the last couple of minutes. And walking out of Park Tolton that day, I was deadly serious when I said to a few of my teammates, lads, so why would you want to win a club championship this year? You can't even go for a pint. And they all kind of thought I was messing, but I was pretty serious, like, because it was difficult to be able to go for a point when you won it. So, like, for all the championships that were won, I'm sure there were some amazing memories and amazing scenes. But look, it was difficult times across the country as well. Like, so we were lucky to have it, but it's a messy kind of a messy year to pick a single moment.
I mean, that's a good point actually about like what's the point of winning it if you can't even celebrate in the pub? And I think Cork looked into that, and I think like we made the collective decision that I will leave it to 20.
I may have delivered that a little bit dismissively there. Like, what I mean really is, I kind of have this a little bit like playing in front of like empty crowds. Like for me, playing club football is as much to do with being out there and playing with friends and the community aspect of it and having fans around. And that wasn't possible this year. And I think a lot of me was probably questioning what's the point here in playing games if not everyone can enjoy it. But obviously they put on streams and people are able to get involved. And I think it actually probably was good for people who are interested in club football. We've seen what the Inter-County Championships have done for a lot of people over the last 2 months.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic at the weekends. It's been amazing for people to be able to sit down in the winter when it's dark. It's not like it was in April and May when the weather was unbelievable and we were able to get out. Jesus Christ, lads, I can't wait for the evenings to start getting brighter again, as they will do from tomorrow onwards or the last week onwards. So I think like I've actually, I'll be honest. I don't know. A final point. I've never missed football more than I did in November and December this year. I like every winter, I'm like, great, I get a break. I can go for pints. I can do whatever. I couldn't care. I don't want to go back to the pub. I actually just want to play football again. So I don't know whether something changed me over winter that...
Come full circle.
The club championships getting their summer in the sun is what needs to happen going forward.
Okay, so that's your moment.
A bit different this year.
That's your moment.
That's probably my
split
moment.
Season.
Yeah.
The season splitting in two.
Split season. I think it needs to happen. I think there was a bit of a change this year. So I'm going to shut up now because I know we've got to wrap up and we've got to get our New Year's Eve celebrations going. But
it's nearly midnight, Tally.
It is, yeah. 10, 9, 8. It's like, come on. Okay. All right. So Tommy's was the split season and Columns was the ultimately futile goal that Cork scored against Kerry, which we didn't know at the time. And that's the whole point of moments. He's right. Do you have a GAA moment, Owen? Okay. I'm sorry you don't. That's us.
Tipperary winning Munster.
OTB.
Tipperary wiping the smile off Cork's face was the moment of the year and probably the moment of the century, let's face it. I loved it so much. Thank you, Tip.
OTBAM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We really, really appreciate you being with us in 2020. We took the decision not to go off air when the pandemic hit, and as a result, loads of you have joined our merry little bandwagon, and it will be continuing next year, tootling away from tomorrow, it being New Year's Day. So we'll see you then. And in the meantime, Happy New Year to you, and don't shame yourself by making New Year's resolutions, because you won't stick to them. Just have the crack, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.